It's a quiet Saturday afternoon. You're digging through boxes in storage when something catches your eye. A cardboard box with your name written in marker that's faded to almost nothing. You lift the flap, and suddenly, you're 8 years old again. A worn teddy bear with one button eye looks up at you. That tiny red Hot Wheels car you carried everywhere for a summer. The action figure whose arm you accidentally broke and tried to fix with tape. Scientists call this phenomenon emotional memory. How a simple toy can make you smell your childhood bedroom, hear those Saturday morning cartoons, and transport you back to being that kid again. Tonight on Midnight Deep Dive, we're exploring 10 iconic collectible toys throughout history. From teddy bears that comforted presidents to action figures that revolutionized an industry, we'll journey through the golden ages of play and discover why certain toys transcend childhood to become treasured collectibles worth thousands. So settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself drift as we uncover the stories behind the toys that shaped generations. It's autumn 1902, and President Theodore Roosevelt is on a hunting trip in Mississippi. The whole thing was supposed to be this diplomatic event. Settle some border disputes, shoot some bears, look presidential. But after several days, Roosevelt hadn't spotted a single bear. His hosts were mortified, so they did what any self-respecting hunting guides would do in that situation. They tracked down an old black bear, tied it to a tree, and invited the president to shoot it. Roosevelt took one look at the situation and basically said absolutely not. This wasn't hunting, this was just sad. The whole thing was unsporting and beneath him. He walked away. Now here's where it gets interesting. A political cartoonist named Clifford Barriman heard about this and drew a cartoon for the Washington Post. He showed Roosevelt turning away from this small, rather cute-looking bear, his hand raised in refusal. It was meant to be a political cartoon, but it captured something else entirely. A moment of compassion that resonated with people. Across the country in Brooklyn, a Russian immigrant named Morris Mitchum ran a candy shop with his wife Rose. Rose was talented at sewing, and when Morris saw that cartoon, he had an idea. Together they created a small stuffed bear with button eyes and jointed limbs that could sit up. Morris put it in their shop window with a handwritten sign, "Teddy's Bear." The response was immediate. People didn't just want to look at it. They wanted to buy it, to take it home. The Mitchums actually wrote to President Roosevelt asking permission to use his name. Roosevelt's response was charmingly modest. He doubted his name would mean much to the toy bear business, but sure, go ahead. Spoiler alert, he was very wrong about that. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a completely separate teddy bear revolution was happening. Marguerite Steiff had been making stuffed toys in Germany since the 1880s. She'd contracted polio as a child and was wheelchair-bound, but that didn't stop her from building a successful business. She started with little felt elephants that were supposed to be pincushions, but children kept playing with them instead. Eventually, her nephew Richard designed a jointed bear. They called it Bear 55 PB. And at the 1903 Leipzig Toy Fair, an American buyer ordered 3,000 of them. So the teddy bear was basically invented twice, on 2 different continents, at almost exactly the same time. Both because people recognized something special about these toys. What made teddy bears revolutionary wasn't just that they were cute. It was their role. Think about toys before teddy bears. You had dolls that were basically pretend babies for girls to take care of, teaching them to be mothers. You had toy soldiers for boys to march around. But teddy bears, they were companions. They could be whatever a child needed them to be. A brave protector at night when the dark seemed scary. A loyal friend who never judged. A silent keeper of secrets too important to tell anyone else. Those early Steiff bears had this very distinctive look. Long snouts, humped backs, elongated limbs. They looked almost like real bears, but gentle. And they had this little metal button in their ear with the Steiff name on it. That button became famous, like a tiny signature. Today, collectors can spot a real Stave bear from across a room just by looking for that button. The bears were made with mohair plush and stuffed with wood wool, which gave them a particular weight and texture. If you've ever held a vintage teddy bear, you know what I mean. They feel different from modern stuffed animals. More substantial somehow, more real. Teddy bears quickly became more than just toys. A Milne based Winnie the Pooh on his son Christopher Robin's actual teddy bear. That real bear, the one that inspired all those stories, now sits in the New York Public Library. You can go see him. His fur is worn thin, one eye is a bit askew, but he's still there, this dignified old bear who witnessed one of the most beloved children's stories ever written. During World War I, teddy bears took on this whole new meaning. Soldiers carried them to the front as reminders of home and normalcy. Children gave them to fathers and brothers shipping out, trying to send a piece of safety and comfort into the unknown. The bears that survived the war became these incredible historical artifacts. Witnesses to history, their worn condition proving they'd done their job of providing comfort in the worst of times. The collecting market for antique teddy bears emerged gradually. The children who'd loved these bears in the early 1900s grew up, and eventually they started looking for them again. Not always the exact bear they'd owned, though sometimes that too, but bears like the ones they remembered, and they were willing to pay serious money. A Stave bear from 1904 in good condition can sell for thousands of dollars now. Some rare colors like cinnamon or black mohair can go for even more. The auction record for a teddy bear actually exceeded $2 million. $2 million for a stuffed bear. But here's the thing, when you talk to teddy bear collectors, they almost never mention the money first. They'll show you their collections and tell you stories. This bear reminds them of their grandmother. That one has the same expression as the bear they lost in a move when they were 7. This whole section over here represents different eras of manufacturing techniques. There's genuine love there, not just investment strategy. Modern teddy bear collecting includes both antique bears and contemporary artist bears. There are craftspeople around the world creating limited editions using traditional techniques, keeping alive the skills that Marguerite Stave and her workers developed over a century ago. These artist bears can become instant collectibles, valuable not because they're old, but because they're beautifully made and rare. Teddy bears basically created modern toy collecting as we know it. Before them, toys were things you played with and then threw away or passed down to younger siblings who would play with them until they fell apart. But teddy bears were different. Parents couldn't bring themselves to throw them away. They wrapped them carefully, stored them in attics, kept them safe. They were the first toys that people intentionally preserved, the first ones that made the journey from plaything to treasure to collectible. Joshua Lionel Cohen didn't wake up one day thinking he'd revolutionize the toy industry. He was an inventor working in New York City around 1900, and like a lot of inventors, he was trying to solve practical problems. He developed this small electric motor and was trying to figure out how to demonstrate what it could do. His solution was pretty straightforward. Put the motor inside a little flat car and run it around a track. Store windows could use it to display merchandise, creating a moving platform that would catch people's eyes. A toy store owner looked at Cohen's invention and said, basically, forget the display idea. Sell me the train. People will want to buy the actual train as a toy. Cohen was skeptical. He was an inventor of serious devices, not toys. But the store owner turned out to be right. People were fascinated. Cohen found himself in the toy business almost by accident. Those early Lionel Trains were pretty basic, but Cohen understood something that would make his company legendary. These trains weren't really for children, or rather, they weren't only for children. They were for the child that lived inside every adult. That part that still dreamed of adventure and speed and the romance of the rails. This is important context. In early 20th century America, trains were everything. They'd conquered the continent, linked distant cities, made the country feel smaller and more connected. Trains represented progress, possibility, the future itself. Miniature trains brought all that power and romance into your living room. A father and son sitting on the floor, running a toy train around a track. That wasn't just play. It was participating in the great American story of expansion and innovation. Through the 1920s and 30s, Lionel Trains evolved from simple novelties into serious collectibles. The standard gauge trains from this era were substantial pieces of engineering. Large, heavy, built with a quality that announced their importance. The locomotives had these great names: the Blue Comet, the Stephen Gerrard. Each one was finished in distinctive colors with brass and nickel trim. When you picked up one of these trains, it had real weight to it. This was a serious object. And Cohen understood that the trains themselves were only part of the story. He created entire worlds around them, stations with illuminated interiors and detailed architecture, signals that actually worked, their colored lights changing to guide imaginary traffic, crossing gates that descended when trains approached, coal loaders that elevated miniature coal pieces into waiting gondola cars. The magic wasn't just in watching the train go in circles. It was in creating a complete miniature world. World War II interrupted everything. Factories converted to military production, and civilian toys basically stopped. The trains produced right before the war became the last examples of that pre-war craftsmanship and quality. After the war, things changed. Materials were different, methods were different, the trains themselves were different. Collectors make a sharp distinction between pre-war and post-war Lionel Trains, and pre-war pieces command serious premiums. The 1950s were Lionel's golden age. Millions of American families had trains under their Christmas trees, fathers and sons, and it was almost always fathers and sons, unfortunately, given the times, bonded over planning track layouts and running trains. A Lionel Train setup became this symbol of middle-class prosperity and the American dream realized. You'd made it if you could afford a Lionel Train for your son. The collecting market developed naturally. Those sons who'd played with Lionel Trains in the 1950s grew up, got jobs, had their own houses, and suddenly had disposable income. And a lot of them wanted their trains back. Sometimes they wanted the exact set they'd owned as kids. Sometimes they wanted the set they'd always wished they'd gotten, but never did. And some discovered the pre-war trains their own fathers might have played with, creating connections across generations. Condition matters enormously in train collecting. A locomotive that's still in its original box, never run, with all the paper inserts intact. That can sell for many times what the same engine would cost if it showed play wear. But there's something beautiful about a well-loved train too. Paint worn where small hands lifted it thousands of times. Gentle scratches that record decades of Christmas mornings. A patina of use that proves this toy brought real joy to someone. Certain pieces achieved legendary status. The girls' train from 1957. They actually made a pastel-colored train specifically marketed to girls. Became incredibly valuable because it was produced in such limited quantities, and because it's this fascinating artifact of 1950s gender marketing. Some brass locomotives from the pre-war era, in rare colors, can sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Even the original boxes and instruction sheets have become collectibles in their own right. The hobby spawned its own entire subculture. Conventions where collectors gather to buy, sell, and trade. Clubs dedicated to specific eras or types of trains. Publications that analyze manufacturing variations and price trends. And the layouts. Some collectors have transformed entire basements into elaborate miniature worlds with multiple levels, detailed scenery, and dozens of trains running on complex schedules. These aren't toys anymore, really. They're art installations, engineering marvels, lifelong projects. Modern Lionel still makes trains. They've got all the latest electronics. realistic sounds, remote controls, synchronized smoke effects. But talk to serious collectors, and many of them prefer the vintage trains. There's an honesty to the old technology. You can see how it works, understand the mechanisms. If something breaks, you can often fix it yourself with basic tools and patience. There's a purity to that simplicity that computer chips and circuit boards can't replicate. Ruth Handler was on vacation with her family in Switzerland during the 1950s when she noticed something interesting. Her daughter Barbara was playing with paper dolls, but not in the way you might expect. Barbara wasn't interested in the dolls as babies to take care of. She was giving them adult roles, creating sophisticated storylines, imagining them as grown women with jobs and social lives. Ruth, who co-founded Mattel with her husband Elliot, saw an opportunity. The American toy market at the time offered girls almost nothing but baby dolls. Everything was designed to teach girls to be mothers, but Barbara clearly wanted something different. She wanted dolls that represented the adult world she was imagining for herself. During that same vacation, Ruth saw a doll called Build Lily in a shop window. Lily was German, based on a comic strip character, and was actually marketed to adult men as a sort of novelty. But Ruth looked past all that and saw the potential. Here was a doll with an adult body. Here was what she'd been looking for. Back in America, the Mattel design team worked to transform the concept into something appropriate for children while keeping those adult proportions. They softened features, refined the body, created something that walked this interesting line between aspirational and appropriate. Ruth named the doll after her daughter, Barbie. When Barbie debuted at the 1959 New York Toy Fair, toy buyers were deeply skeptical. The doll's adult figure seemed wrong for a children's toy. Her fashionable clothing seemed too sophisticated, and at $3 she was expensive, significantly pricier than most dolls on the market. Buyer after buyer passed. They thought Mattel had completely misjudged the market. They couldn't have been more wrong. Mattel did something revolutionary. They advertised Barbie directly to children on television, specifically during the Mickey Mouse Club. This was basically unheard of. Toy marketing was always aimed at parents. But Mattel went straight to the actual customers. Kids saw the commercials and started begging their parents for Barbie. Toy stores that had passed on ordering her suddenly couldn't keep her in stock. The original 1959 Barbie, collectors call her #1 Barbie, wore a black and white striped swimsuit, came with sunglasses and little black shoes, and had her hair in a ponytail. She had these distinctive side-glancing eyes and arched eyebrows. Today, if you find one in good condition, she can sell for thousands of dollars. But Barbie's real genius wasn't the doll itself. It was the world Mattel built around her. The fashions were incredible. Mattel hired actual designers to create miniature clothing that rivaled real couture in its detail and quality. Tiny buttons that actually buttoned, miniature zippers that really worked, seams that were properly finished. Each outfit came separately with its own accessories, microscopic jewelry, little purses, shoes. A girl could change Barbie from casual to formal, from day wear to evening gown. She could live vicariously through this plastic proxy, imagining all the possibilities of adult life. As decades passed, Barbie evolved to reflect changing culture. 1960s Barbie was all mod fashion and bright colors. 1970s brought Malibu Barbie with her tan and beach lifestyle. 1980s went full glamour with big hair and sparkly gowns. Each era of Barbie is basically a time capsule of what fashion and culture looked like at that moment. Mattel expanded the world too. Ken showed up in 1961 as Barbie's boyfriend, then Midge as her best friend, eventually younger siblings, and later a whole cast of diverse friends representing different ethnicities and backgrounds, though that diversity came with its share of controversy over representation and stereotyping. Here's something interesting about Barbie. She's always had these different careers. Astronaut Barbie, Dr. Barbie, Business Executive Barbie. At a time when women's career options were pretty limited in real life, Barbie was showing girls that they could aspire to anything. Each career doll came with appropriate accessories. Surgical instruments for Dr. Barbie, a space suit for astronaut Barbie. Collecting vintage Barbie requires understanding a lot of nuanced details. Dolls still in their original boxes are worth more, but the condition of the box matters almost as much as the doll. Early boxes had distinctive graphics that collectors prize. There's this whole category called NRFB, Never Removed from Box, which represents the holy grail for many collectors. But condition goes beyond just being unopened. Collectors examine dolls for something called green ear, which is this chemical reaction that can turn the ear paint greenish over time. They check for color fading, especially with dark-haired dolls where the dye can transfer to the vinyl body. They make sure limbs are still tight, not loose and floppy. They verify all the original clothing and tiny accessories are present. Even the condition of the doll's hair matters. Whether it's maintained its original style or has gone frizzy with age. Some Barbies achieved legendary status. Midnight Red Barbie from 1965, with her flame red hair, is highly sought after. Color Magic Barbie, whose hair could change color, is valuable especially if that feature still works. Twist and Turn Barbie from 1967, with her innovative waist mechanism that let her actually turn, marked a significant evolution in the doll's design. Barbie has always been controversial. Critics argue her proportions promote unhealthy body images. Others object to the emphasis on fashion and appearance. Some feel she reinforces gender stereotypes despite all those different careers. Mattel has responded over the years by introducing different body types, more diverse skin tones, and broader representation. The debates continue. But for collectors, especially those who grew up with Barbie, she represents something more personal than any cultural critique can fully capture. She was their doll, their companion through countless hours of imaginative play. Finding that exact Barbie from childhood, whether at a thrift store or through online sellers, can trigger unexpectedly powerful emotions. It's not just finding a toy, it's recovering a piece of your own history. Jack Odell had a problem. His daughter Anne's school had this rule: you could bring a toy to school, but only if it was small enough to fit inside a matchbox. Anne loved miniature toys, but most were too big to meet that requirement. Jack worked for Lesney Products, a British die-casting company. He decided to solve his daughter's problem himself. He created this tiny brass road roller, specifically sized to fit comfortably in a standard matchbox. Anne loved it, her classmates were fascinated, and Jack realized he might be onto something. Lesney launched the Matchbox series in 1953. Miniature vehicles, each one packaged in a box designed to look exactly like a matchbox. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. These were affordable toys that kids could actually fit in their pockets and carry anywhere. And unlike bigger toys, they were cheap enough that children could collect multiple cars without bankrupting their parents. Those early Matchbox cars had real charm. Each vehicle was carefully researched and modeled after real automobiles, trucks, construction equipment. The die-casting process created these crisp details. Tiny grills, recognizable body shapes, miniature license plates. They were metal, which gave them weight and substance. When you held a Matchbox car, it felt valuable. These weren't flimsy plastic toys. They were solid little objects that could take serious abuse. The boxes themselves were part of the magic. Each one featured colorful illustrations showing the vehicle in action. A fire engine racing to a blaze, a cement mixer at a construction site. The boxes opened like little drawers, revealing the treasure inside nestled in paper or cardboard inserts. Collectors today will pay premium prices for cars that still have their original boxes in good condition. Matchbox dominated the miniature car market through the 1950s and into the 60s. They even created a Models of Yesteryear line in 1956, reproducing vintage vehicles from the early automotive era. This was actually pretty revolutionary, acknowledging that these weren't just children's toys, that adults might want to collect them too. Then in 1968, everything changed. Mattel, yes, the same company that made Barbie, decided to enter the die-cast car market with a product called Hot Wheels, and they had a very different vision. While Matchbox cars were realistic and detailed, Hot Wheels would be fast, flashy, and fantastical. The difference was immediately obvious. Hot Wheels had these bright, candy-colored paint finishes called Spectraflame that seemed to glow. The paint actually had metal flakes in it, giving it this incredible sheen. But the real innovation was the wheels. Low-friction bearing wheels that let Hot Wheels cars roll much farther and faster than any die-cast toys before them. Mattel advertised them as the fastest metal cars in the world, and honestly, they might have been right. The original 16 Hot Wheels models from 1968 are legendary among collectors now. There were modified versions of real cars, the custom Camaro, the custom Cougar. But there were also these wild, fantastical designs that no actual car company would ever build. The Beatnik Bandit with its bubble canopy. The Silhouette, which looked like something from a science fiction movie. These weren't just toys of real cars. They were automotive fever dreams. The period from 1968 to 1977 is called the Red Line Era, named after the red stripe on the tires. These early Hot Wheels, especially with that Spectraflame paint, are strikingly beautiful even today. Collectors pursue them with real passion, and rare colors or variations can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Both companies understood that cars alone weren't enough. You needed worlds for them to inhabit. Hot Wheels created that iconic orange track that could be configured into elaborate layouts with loops, jumps, intersections. They had the Supercharger, which was battery-powered and would boost cars to incredible speeds. Kids spent hours perfecting their track designs, experimenting with physics and velocity while thinking they were just playing. Matchbox developed their own play systems. Matchbox City with its roads and buildings, creating this whole urban environment where their realistic cars made perfect sense. A fire engine needed a fire station to come home to. A taxi needed a garage. Collecting these miniature cars appeals to something fundamental in human nature, the love of the hunt. You never know what you might find at a garage sale or estate sale. Maybe a complete set still in its original carrying case. Maybe a rare color variation mixed in with common models. Maybe that one specific car you've been searching for. Condition is crucial. Mint condition means no paint chips, no scratches, original wheels, everything intact. But well-played cars have their own appeal and much lower prices, which makes the hobby accessible at any budget. Some collectors actually prefer slightly worn cars because they show evidence of the joy they brought to their original owners. Some models achieved truly legendary status. The 1969 Hot Wheels pink rear-loading Beach Bomb, a prototype VW van where the surfboard's loaded through the back, is one of the most valuable Hot Wheels ever. Examples have sold for over $100,000. On the Matchbox side, certain rare colors of the 1961 Majestute's crane can fetch thousands. The community is active and knowledgeable. Online forums discuss recent finds and debate authentication. Local collector groups organize swap meets. Die-cast displays appear at car shows alongside actual vehicles, which is kind of beautiful. These miniature representations honored alongside the real things. Both Matchbox and Hot Wheels still make cars today, creating new models while occasionally reproducing classics. Modern cars have more sophisticated details, but many collectors prefer the simplicity of the originals. There's an honesty there, no electronics, no complications, just metal, paint, and wheels that roll. Olkirk Christiansen was a carpenter in a small Danish town called Billund, trying to survive the Great Depression by making wooden toys. Simple stuff: cars, animals, yo-yos. Good quality toys that reflected his carpentry skills, but nothing that particularly stood out in the marketplace. Then in 1934, he named his company Lego, combining the Danish words like "godt," play well. He had no idea what he was creating. The real revolution came in 1947, when Ole bought one of Denmark's first plastic injection molding machines. Plastic was still relatively new in toy manufacturing, and Ole saw potential. In 1949, Lego produced one of their first plastic toys, the automatic binding brick. These early bricks, inspired by similar British blocks, could connect to each other, but not very well. Structures fell apart easily, which was frustrating. Ole's son Gottfried realized the connection was the key to everything. If they could make blocks that held together firmly but could still be taken apart easily, they'd have something special. After years of development, they patented the improved design in 1958. This version had tubes on the bottom that fit perfectly with the studs on top. This seems simple, but it was actually brilliant engineering. The blocks held together firmly enough to build substantial structures, but released easily enough that children could take them apart without breaking them or their fingernails. Everything was proportioned mathematically. 2 4x2 bricks stacked equal exactly the height of 5 plates. The entire system worked together with precision. Here's what's amazing. Every Lego brick made since 1958 is compatible with every other Lego brick ever made. A piece from 1960 connects perfectly with one manufactured this year. This backwards compatibility means Lego never becomes obsolete. You can combine any sets, add new pieces to old collections. Building instructions might suggest one specific model, but the bricks can become literally anything. Through the 1960s and 70s, Lego expanded into themed sets. Castle in 1978 brought medieval building with knights and fortifications. Space launched in 1979 with astronauts and rockets. These weren't random choices. They were complete, coherent worlds that children could construct and inhabit through play. The minifigure in 1978 changed everything. Before that, Lego people were just simple brick-built shapes. The new minifigures had movable arms and legs, removable accessories, and that iconic smiling face. Suddenly, Lego wasn't just about buildings and vehicles. It was about stories, characters, adventures. Vintage Lego sets from the 70s and 80s are serious collectibles now. A mint-in-box castle set from 1978 can command hundreds or thousands of dollars. Complete classic space sets with all their specialized pieces and minifigures are highly sought after. What makes Lego collecting particularly interesting is that, unlike most toys, Lego was explicitly designed to be taken apart and rebuilt. Truly mint, never-assembled vintage sets are exceptionally rare because most people actually built them. Yellowing is a unique Lego problem. Certain colors and years of the ABS plastic they use are susceptible to discoloration from UV light or storage conditions. White and light gray pieces especially can turn yellow. Collectors either accept this as vintage patina or attempt to reverse it through various restoration techniques. There are actual debates about this, whether to restore or preserve as is. Everything changed in 1999 when Lego introduced licensed themes, starting with Star Wars. Suddenly, Lego could recreate beloved movies and characters in their distinctive blocky style. Harry Potter followed, then Batman, Marvel, Lord of the Rings. These licensed sets appeal to both Lego enthusiasts and fans of the source material. Some licensed sets became immediate collectibles. The Ultimate Collector Series Millennium Falcon from 2007 had over 5,000 pieces and cost $500 at retail. When it was discontinued, sealed examples started selling for thousands. Lego had become a legitimate investment vehicle, with financial analysts actually tracking certain sets' appreciation rates. The AFOL community, adult fans of Lego, embraces building as a legitimate adult hobby. They attend conventions, share creations online, focus on particular themes or building techniques. Some create incredible architectural models. Others build elaborate mechanical contraptions. Some create entire miniature cities. Lego's creator expert and architecture lines specifically target adult builders. The Taj Mahal has 5923 pieces. The Colosseum has 9036 pieces. These are building projects that can take days or weeks, more like assembling complex puzzles than playing with toys. The modularity means you can truly customize. Through Lego's Pick-a-Brick service or sites like Bricklink, you can buy specific pieces to gather everything you need for custom creations or modifications. The only limit is imagination and budget. Bernie Loomis from Kenner Products sat in a darkened theater in spring 1977, watching an early screening of some space movie that 20th Century Fox hoped might recoup its production costs. The movie was called Star Wars. As Loomis watched, he saw something that apparently escaped a lot of people. This wasn't just a movie. This was a universe. Characters, vehicles, creatures, locations. Children would desperately want to recreate this world. He contacted George Lucas's licensing people immediately. Several bigger toy companies had already passed on Star Wars. Science fiction toys traditionally didn't sell well. The movie itself seemed risky, but Loomis saw what others missed. Kenner quickly secured the license. Then came the problem nobody anticipated. The movie opened in May 1977 and became an instant cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, everyone wanted Star Wars toys, and Kenner had absolutely nothing to sell. They'd planned to have toys ready by Christmas, but actual production required months they didn't have. Stores were being flooded with requests, and Kenner's shelves were empty. Their solution became legendary in the toy industry. They created the early bird certificate package. Basically, an empty box containing a certificate promising that the first 4 action figures would be mailed out once production was complete. They were literally selling empty boxes with promises inside. It was an unprecedented gamble. Parents actually bought these by the thousands, and Kenner worked frantically to fulfill their promises. When those first Star Wars action figures finally arrived in early 1978, they revolutionized everything. Kenner chose a 3.75-inch scale instead of the standard 12-inch G.I. Joe size. This smaller scale meant they could make vehicles and playsets in proper proportion without making them impossibly huge or expensive. You could actually own the Millennium Falcon spaceship for your figures. At the larger scale, that would have been prohibitively expensive. The figures themselves were simple, basic 5-point articulation that let them sit and stand. But the sculpting captured the essence of each character. Each came with appropriate accessories. Luke had his lightsaber, Han had his blaster, Vader had his cape. Because everything was so small, these accessories were tiny and incredibly easy to lose, which makes complete vintage figures with all their original equipment more valuable today. The packaging became iconic. Each figure came mounted on a cardboard card with a clear plastic bubble protecting the toy. The card art featured images from the movie and that distinctive Star Wars logo. The back of the card showed other available figures, creating awareness and encouraging continued collecting. These cards matter tremendously to modern collectors. A mint-on card figure can sell for many times what a loose example would cost. Kenner produced Star Wars toys from 1977 to 1985, covering the entire original trilogy. The line eventually included over 100 different action figures, not just the main heroes, but also background aliens who appeared on screen for maybe 5 seconds. This completist approach established a template that toy lines still follow today. The vehicles expanded the world beyond simple figures. The Millennium Falcon from 1979 became an instant classic with its multiple compartments, working ramp, and space for figures to act out scenes. The Death Star playset had 4 levels connected by a working elevator. The AT-AT Walker stood over 2 feet tall and dominated any playroom it entered. This wasn't just play, this was storytelling. Children recreated scenes from the movies or invented entirely new adventures. The toys enabled narrative creation. Kids became directors of their own Star Wars stories. The detailed universe George Lucas created gave them rich material for imagination. When the original Kenner line ended in 1985, it created a gap that collectors would eventually fill. The children who'd played with these figures in the late 70s and early 80s grew up, got jobs, had disposable income, and they started seeking the toys of their youth. What had been $2 toys became worth 20, 50, hundreds for rare figures in pristine condition. Certain figures achieved legendary status. The vinyl cape Jawa, produced only briefly before they switched to a cloth cape, became a holy grail. The rocket-firing Boba Fett, prototyped but never released due to safety concerns, exists in only a handful of examples, potentially worth tens of thousands of dollars. Even regular figures have variations that serious collectors catalog and pursue. As prices increased, condition grading became essential. Professional services now encapsulate vintage figures in protective cases with numerical grades. A figure graded 85 commands significantly more than one graded 75. This professionalization transformed toy collecting into something approaching fine art collecting. The line relaunched in 1995, timed with the theatrical re-releases of the original trilogy. New figures featured better articulation and detail than vintage Kenner, but many collectors prefer the simpler vintage figures, valuing their connection to childhood over modern improvements. The Kenner vintage line created standards that became templates for all action figure collecting. The importance of packaging, the appeal of completist collecting, the value of variants and rarities, and this whole concept that toys kept mint in package would appreciate in value. Before Star Wars, very few people carefully preserved toy packaging. After Star Wars, thousands of collectors kept figures sealed, creating this entire market based on never actually playing with the toys. Hasbro had a problem in the early 1980s. Their G.I. Joe line, those 12-inch action figures that had dominated boys' toys since 1964, was dying. The original Joe had been discontinued in 1978, a casualty of rising oil prices that made plastic expensive and changing attitudes about war toys in the post-Vietnam era. But Hasbro believed there was still life in the brand if they could reinvent it for a new generation. The solution came from a surprising place. Star Wars had proven that kids would enthusiastically collect smaller 3 3/4-inch action figures. What if Hasbro relaunched G.I. Joe at that scale? The smaller size meant lower costs, which meant lower retail prices, which meant kids could afford to collect more figures. And instead of a single soldier, what if Joe became a team? An entire military force, with specialists for every mission imaginable. The new G.I. Joe launched in 1982 with the subtitle, A Real American Hero. Right from the start, this wasn't just a toy line, it was a universe. Hasbro partnered with Marvel Comics to create backstories for every character, giving them code names, specialties, and personalities. Snake Eyes, the mysterious ninja commando who never spoke. Duke, the confident team leader. Scarlet, one of the first prominent female action figures who was every bit as capable as her male counterparts. These weren't generic soldiers, they were individuals. The villains were equally well developed. Cobra, the terrorist organization determined to rule the world, had its own hierarchy and memorable characters. Cobra Commander, with his distinctive metallic mask and melodramatic schemes. Destro, the arms dealer with the chrome head. The Baroness, intelligent and deadly in her black leather and glasses. Later editions like Serpentor and the Cobra-La storyline pushed the mythology in increasingly wild directions. What made the new G.I. Joe brilliant was the level of detail in the figures themselves. Each one came with multiple accessories specific to their specialty. Breaker, the communications officer, had a backpack radio. Torpedo, the Navy SEAL, came with flippers and a spear gun. The accessories were scaled perfectly and added tremendous play value. Kids spent hours making sure each Joe had exactly the right gear for their imagined missions. The vehicles escalated the collecting to another level entirely. These weren't simple toy cars. They were elaborate military machines with working features. The MOBAT tank had a rotating turret. The Vamp Jeep had a mounted machine gun. The Skystriker jet was nearly 3 feet long, based on the F-14 Tomcat, and remains one of the most impressive toys of the 1980s. On the Cobra side, the Hiss tank with its distinctive blue color scheme and the Rattler attack plane gave the bad guys equally impressive hardware. Playsets created complete environments for battles. The USS Flag aircraft carrier, released in 1985, was the Holy Grail. Over 7 feet long, it remains one of the largest toys ever mass-produced. It retailed for around $100, which was substantial in 1985, but kids begged their parents for it anyway. Finding a complete, undamaged flag today can cost thousands of dollars. The animated series and comic books reinforced the mythology constantly. The Marvel comic, written primarily by Larry Hama, ran for 155 issues and took the characters seriously, developing them beyond simple good guy bad guy dynamics. The cartoon, which debuted in 1983, brought the characters to life with distinctive voices and catchphrases. Cobra Commander's whiny, scheming voice became iconic, and every episode ended with a public service announcement featuring a Joe offering safety advice, always concluding with "Now you know," and knowing is half the battle. File cards on the back of each package provided character details. These weren't just toy descriptions. They were personnel files with birthplaces, specialties, and brief biographical information. Collectors read these obsessively, memorizing which Joe came from which state, what their military qualifications were, what made them tick. The file cards transformed simple action figures into characters with depth. The line evolved dramatically through the 1980s. Early figures had straightforward military aesthetics, realistic uniforms, conventional weapons. By the mid-80s, things got wilder. Ninja characters became prevalent, influenced by the rising popularity of martial arts in American culture. Science fiction elements crept in with figures like Sci-Fi with his laser rifle. The 1987 movie introduced biological Cobra-La antagonists that divided the fanbase. Some loved the added mythology, others felt it strayed too far from the military roots. Collecting G.I. Joe became increasingly complex. Hasbro released figures in numbered series, and completists wanted every single one, but variations made things challenging. Early versions of Snake Eyes had a straight-arm design, while later ones had swivel-arm articulation. Cobra Commander came with a regular mask or a hooded variant. These subtle differences created subcategories that serious collectors tracked meticulously. The condition factors were particular to G.I. Joe. The rubber bands inside figures that provided the swivel arm articulation would deteriorate over time, causing limbs to become loose or fall off entirely. The small accessories, rifles, backpacks, helmets, were easily lost during play. The thumb on many figures would break off from repeatedly inserting weapons. Finding a vintage Joe in truly mint condition, with tight joints and all original accessories, commands premium prices. Certain figures achieved legendary status. The 1984 Snake Eyes in his original black outfit is highly sought after. The mail-order exclusive Cobra Commander with hooded head, obtained by sending in flag points from packages, is rare because it required buying multiple figures to accumulate enough points. The Defiant Space Shuttle Complex, while not rare, is valuable simply because few survived intact. It was enormous and complex, prone to being broken or discarded. The community of Joe collectors is particularly passionate and organized. Online databases like YoJoe document every figure, vehicle, and variant with extraordinary detail. Collector conventions feature elaborate dioramas recreating scenes from the cartoon or comics. Customizers create unique figures by combining parts from different Joes or sculpting new pieces entirely, sometimes selling these customs for more than vintage originals. The line officially ended in 1994, a victim of changing toy trends and market saturation. But nostalgia brought it back in the 2000s with the 25th anniversary collection, featuring updated versions of classic characters with modern articulation. New movies in 2009 and 2013 introduced Joe to another generation, though longtime fans had mixed feelings about the Hollywood interpretations. What makes G.I. Joe endure is how it balanced military realism with just enough fantasy to make it exciting without being completely absurd. The characters had depth unusual for action figures. The vehicles and playsets offered incredible play value. The mythology, developed through comics and cartoons, gave kids a framework for their imagined battles. And unlike some toy lines that were just products, G.I. Joe felt like a complete world you could inhabit. Modern collectors appreciate different aspects. Some focus on Minton card figures, preserving them like art. Others build armies, accumulating multiples of the same figure to create realistic military units. Still others focus on vehicles, displaying them in elaborate dioramas. And some simply want to recapture the figures they had as kids, the specific Joes they played with until the rubber bands broke and the accessories got lost in the backyard. Hasbro executives were at a Tokyo toy fair in the early 1980s, searching for products they might license for America. Among all the displays, they found two Japanese toy lines, Diaclone and Micro Change, both made by Takara. These toys were ingenious, robots that transformed into vehicles, cassette tapes, and other objects. The engineering was sophisticated, the transformations clever. Hasbro saw potential, but there was a problem. The Japanese versions were basically military mecha without much narrative context, just robots that turned into things. Hasbro needed a story. They contracted with Marvel Comics to develop mythology that would give these robots purpose and personality. What emerged was this epic tale of ancient robots from the planet Cybertron, locked in a civil war between the heroic Autobots and the evil Decepticons. They'd crashed on Earth millions of years ago and were just now awakening in the present day. It was mythology scaled up to match the ambition of the toys themselves. The name Transformers was perfect. These weren't robots that needed separate vehicle toys. They were both things simultaneously. With a series of twists and rotations, a robot became a truck or a jet or a cassette tape. The transformation itself was the play pattern, engaging puzzle-solving abilities while delivering the satisfaction of essentially getting two toys in one. The first wave in 1984 established what Transformers were all about. Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots, transformed from this heroic robot into a semi-truck cab with a trailer. The design balanced accessibility, simple enough for kids to figure out, with sophistication, enough steps that completing the transformation felt like an accomplishment. The trailer became a combat deck with a repair bay. Optimus wasn't just a toy. He was a complete mobile base. Megatron, the Decepticon leader, transformed into a realistic Walther P-38 pistol, complete with scope, stock, silencer. He came with chrome accessories and in gun mode could be held and fired by a child, though he didn't shoot anything. This would later become controversial, but in 1984, it represented peak innovation. A robot that became an actual weapon at the same scale as the other toys. The engineering variety was impressive. Some figures had simple transformations, just a few steps. Others, particularly the larger, more expensive pieces, featured complex transformations with multiple intermediate stages. This difficulty range meant the line appealed to different ages and skill levels. A young kid could handle Bumblebee's straightforward cart-a-robot conversion. Older children could tackle the intricate transformations of figures like Shockwave or Jetfire. Hasbro's multimedia approach was groundbreaking. They launched an animated TV series alongside the toys, with episodes introducing new characters exactly when those toys hit stores. The show wasn't just a long advertisement. It was genuinely entertaining science fiction that gave each robot a distinct personality. Optimus Prime became this wise father figure. Starscream was a treacherous schemer. Soundwave spoke in this menacing electronic monotone, while commanding his cassette tape minions. The 1986 animated movie shocked everyone. Hasbro made this bold narrative decision to kill off Optimus Prime to make room for new product lines. The death scene devastated children. Optimus passing the matrix of leadership to Ultra Magnus while surrounded by his grieving Autobots. Kids were crying in theaters. Parents were calling Hasbro upset. The company hadn't anticipated how emotionally attached children had become to these characters. The backlash was intense enough that they brought Optimus back in later episodes. It taught the entire toy industry that characters built through multimedia storytelling couldn't just be casually discarded. Collecting Transformers presents unique challenges. Transformation means moving parts, and moving parts break. Vintage Transformers often have stress marks on the plastic, broken tabs, missing accessories. Chrome parts flake and chip. Stickers yellow and peel. Finding truly mint vintage Transformers requires patience and money. The box art was stunning. These painted illustrations showing the robots in dramatic action poses. They weren't photographs of the actual toys, but artistic interpretations that made the figures seem more impressive than the plastic could ever be. Sometimes kids would be disappointed when they got the actual toy home and it didn't quite match the box. But those illustrations have become collectible art in their own right. Certain Transformers achieved legendary status. The Diaclone-era versions, released briefly before Hasbro's rebranding, had different colors and came without the Transformers fiction. European exclusives available only in specific markets command premiums. Mail-away exclusives like Reflector, where you had to send in proofs of purchase and wait weeks for delivery, are rare survivors in complete condition. The line evolved across multiple generations. Generation 1 from 1984 to 1990 is the foundation. Generation 2 from 1992 to 1995 featured brighter colors and more kid-friendly designs. Beast Wars from 1996 had robots that transformed into animals instead of vehicles, which divided the fan base pretty dramatically. Countless subsequent lines have brought new interpretations. Modern collecting exists on multiple levels. Some focus exclusively on vintage Generation 1. Others prefer the current Masterpiece series, adult-focused versions with superior engineering and screen accuracy. The Generations lines offer updated versions of classic characters with modern articulation. You can specialize by character, seeking every version of Optimus Prime or Starscream ever produced, or by specific series or size class. The transformation gimmick creates this unique dilemma. Should mint-in-box figures stay in their initial mode, or should you verify the transformation actually works? Opening a sealed transformer to test it destroys the packaging value, but leaving it sealed means never knowing if all the parts are present or functional. It's this tension between toy as investment and toy as functional object that other collectibles don't really face. International variations created a complex collecting landscape. Japanese versions often had superior quality, different paint applications, or exclusive characters. European releases sometimes had unique accessories. Even within American releases, running changes during production created subtle variations that collectors catalog and pursue with remarkable dedication. The Transformers collecting community is particularly active and knowledgeable. Online databases catalog every figure, every variation, every accessory with photographic documentation. Forums debate transformation techniques and restoration methods. Conventions feature Transformers sections that rival Star Wars in their breadth and the dedication of collectors. Ty Warner was a toy salesman with a vision that seemed almost too simple to succeed. In 1993, he introduced a line of small plush animals filled with plastic pellets rather than traditional stuffing. He called them Beanie Babies and priced them at just $5 each. The initial designs were simple: a bear, a dog, a pig, a few others. Nothing suggested they'd become the most spectacularly successful and controversial collectible of the 1990s. What made Beanie Babies different was their unique feel. The plastic pellet filling, PVC pellets that Warner called beans, gave them this floppy, posable quality unlike traditionally stuffed animals. You could arrange a Beanie Baby in various positions, and it would maintain those poses. The bodies conformed to surfaces, draping naturally. This tactile quality made them more engaging than typical stiff plush toys. The early Beanie Babies had understated charm. They weren't cartoonish or overly cute. Their expressions were subtle, their colors realistic rather than garish. Each came with a heart-shaped tag, the hang tag on the ear and the tush tag sewn into the body, providing the animal's name, birth date, and a short poem. These tags would become crucial to the collecting phenomenon that followed. Warner made several strategic decisions that transformed Beanie Babies from simple toys into collectible obsessions. First, he limited distribution to small gift shops rather than major retailers. This created scarcity and made Beanie Babies feel special rather than mass market. Second, he constantly introduced new designs while retiring older ones, creating artificial scarcity that drove demand. Third, he never announced which beanies would be retired or when, keeping collectors in constant uncertainty. The retirement strategy proved particularly brilliant. When a Beanie Baby was retired, no more would ever be produced. Suddenly, a $5 toy became difficult to find. Secondary market prices began rising. People who'd purchased beanies casually realized they owned rare items potentially worth more than retail price. This realization sparked a collecting frenzy unlike anything the toy industry had seen. McDonald's inadvertently accelerated the craze with their 1997 promotion offering miniature Beanie Babies as Happy Meal toys. Adults flooded McDonald's, ordering Happy Meals just for the toys. Some restaurants limited purchases. Others struggled to maintain stock. The promotion exposed Beanie Babies to massive new audiences and legitimized adult collecting of what were ostensibly children's toys. Price guides emerged, tracking the supposed value of each Beanie Baby. These guides, often published monthly, became gospel for collectors. People consulted them obsessively, calculating their collection's theoretical worth. Stories circulated of rare beanies selling for hundreds or thousands. The dark blue Peanut the elephant, produced briefly before being replaced with a lighter blue version, supposedly commanded $3,000. The bear commemorating Princess Diana's death became one of the most sought after. Tag condition became paramount. Beanie Babies needed both their hang tag and tush tag to be considered complete. Mint condition meant tags attached, crease-free, with protective plastic covers purchased specifically to preserve them. Collectors developed elaborate systems for storing and displaying their beanies, often keeping them in plastic cases, never touching them, treating $5 plush toys like museum artifacts. The psychology of Beanie Baby collecting differed from traditional toy collecting. Many collectors believed they were making investments, building portfolios that would fund children's college educations or retirement. Price guides and media coverage reinforced this perception, reporting astronomical prices as if they were established facts rather than occasional anomalies. People rationalized spending thousands on Beanie Babies as financial planning rather than hobby spending. Specialty stores emerged selling nothing but Beanie Babies and related accessories. These shops featured walls of beanies organized by type, rarity, or retirement status. Serious collectors visited regularly, checking for new releases or hoping to find rare pieces. The shops became social spaces where collectors traded information, showed off acquisitions, and fueled each other's enthusiasm. The internet accelerated trading and speculation. eBay, launched in 1995, became the primary marketplace. Sellers posted photos with detailed descriptions of tag condition, generation, and rarity. Auctions for rare pieces attracted attention and inflated prices. Online forums allowed collectors worldwide to connect, share information, and coordinate purchasing strategies. Warner continued introducing new beanies at a remarkable pace. By 1999, he'd released hundreds of different designs: bears, cats, dogs, exotic animals, sea creatures, eventually fantasy creatures like dragons. Holiday-themed beanies appeared for Christmas, Valentine's Day, other occasions. Sports-related beanies celebrated teams and events. The variety seemed endless, and completist collectors struggled to keep pace. The generation of the tags, Warner made multiple versions over the years, became another level of complexity. First-generation tags had simple designs. Later generations added holographic elements, barcodes, security features. Collectors prized early-generation tags on popular beanies, adding another variable to already complex valuations. Authentication became necessary as counterfeits entered the market. Fake beanies, often manufactured overseas, mimicked popular designs but with subtle quality differences. Tags might have spelling errors or wrong fonts. Fabric might feel slightly different. Seams might be less neat. Serious collectors learned to spot fakes, and authentication services emerged to verify valuable pieces. The bubble burst gradually, then suddenly. By 1999, market saturation was obvious. Too many beanies existed, too many collectors had accumulated too many pieces, and new buyers weren't entering fast enough. Warner's announcement that he'd retire all Beanie Babies on December 31, 1999, was seen by some as final marketing ploy, and by others as acknowledgement that the phenomenon had run its course. After public outcry, Warner reversed the decision, but confidence was shaken. The 2000s saw values collapse. Rare beanies that supposedly commanded thousands sold for dollars if they sold at all. Price guides became obsolete almost overnight. Collectors who'd spent thousands found their investments worth a fraction of purchase price. The crash became a cautionary tale about speculative collecting and the difference between genuine rarity and manufactured scarcity. Yet some Beanie Babies retained value, particularly first-edition pieces in absolutely pristine condition, or extremely rare variations produced in tiny quantities. These represented genuine collectibles rather than speculative bubble pieces. Serious collectors distinguished between truly rare beanies and mass-produced pieces that millions bought hoping for investment returns. Modern perspective on Beanie Babies is complicated. They represent both an innovative toy design and a cautionary tale about speculation. They brought joy to millions of children while causing financial stress for adults who treated them as investments. They demonstrated both the power of smart marketing and the dangers of artificial scarcity, combined with speculative mania. Mike Becker founded a small company called Funko in 1998 to create nostalgic bobbleheads and other collectible figures. For years, Funko remained a minor player, producing licensed figures of restaurant mascots and retro characters. The company changed hands in 2005, with new owner Brian Mariotti seeing potential beyond bobbleheads. But it wasn't until 2010, with the introduction of Funko Pop vinyl figures, that the company found the formula that would revolutionize modern collecting. The Funko Pop design was deceptively simple: stylized figures with oversized square heads, tiny bodies, and black dot eyes. Every character, regardless of source material, received the same basic treatment. Batman, Darth Vader, Harry Potter, countless others rendered in this distinctive blocky style. The uniformity created instant recognizability. You could identify a Funko Pop from across a room. What made Funko Pops revolutionary wasn't their design, but their licensing strategy. Funko secured agreements with seemingly every entertainment property imaginable. Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Disney, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, anime series, video games, musicians, athletes, historical figures. If it had cultural recognition, Funko made a pop of it. This comprehensive approach meant there were pops for every possible collector interest. The pricing proved crucial. At around $10 to $12 retail, pops were affordable impulse purchases. Unlike expensive premium collectibles requiring significant financial commitment, buying a Funko Pop felt casual. This accessibility democratized collecting, allowing anyone to participate regardless of budget. You could build a collection gradually without financial stress. The packaging furthered the appeal. Each figure came in a window box, allowing visibility while protecting the collectible. The boxes featured distinctive designs with large product photos, the Pop logo, and property branding. Like Beanie Babies tags or action figures cards, the box became integral to collectability. Mint-in-box Pops commanded higher prices than loose ones, leading many collectors to keep figures perpetually boxed. Funko created scarcity through exclusive releases. Convention exclusives, available only at specific events, instantly became valuable. Store exclusives through retailers like Target, Walmart, or Hot Topic drove traffic to those chains. Limited edition numbering made certain pops artificially rare. Chase variants, alternate versions randomly inserted in cases, turned pop hunting into treasure seeking. These strategies created secondary markets, where rare pops sold for multiples of retail price. The cultural moment that Funko Pops captured was significant. Pop culture had become massively mainstream, with comic book movies dominating box offices, fantasy series attracting enormous audiences, and fandom culture losing its outsider status. Pops allowed people to display their fandoms publicly and proudly. A row of pops on an office desk declared interests and identity without words. Social media amplified pop collecting. Instagram accounts dedicated to pop collections accumulated hundreds of thousands of followers. Unboxing videos on YouTube showed collectors opening new pops, sharing experiences with virtual communities. Hashtags created discovery and connection. The visual appeal of pops, bright colors, distinctive design, displayability, made them perfect for social media sharing. The variety within the pop format allowed subcategories. Regular-sized pops were joined by 6-inch and 10-inch versions for larger characters. Pop rides paired characters with vehicles. Pop Town included buildings or environments. 2-packs featured character combinations. Deluxe versions added elements extending beyond the standard format. This variety provided collecting goals beyond simply acquiring every pop ever made. Beyond Funko Pops, the 2010s saw explosion in designer toy culture. La Boo Boo, created by Hong Kong artist Casing Lung, became a sensation, particularly in Asian markets. These elf-like creatures with distinctive serrated teeth came primarily through blind box purchasing. Sealed boxes where the specific design inside remained unknown until opening. This gambling element added excitement and encouraged repeated purchases. Sunny Angels, created by Japanese company Dreams, offered another blind box collectible. Small cherubic figures wearing various hats or headpieces. The minimalist design and Japanese aesthetic appealed to collectors seeking something different from Western pop culture figures. Like Labubu, Sunny Angels inspired devoted collecting communities and robust secondary markets for rare variants. Pop Mart, a Chinese company, created an empire around blind box designer toys. Their vending machine-style displays in malls and stores worldwide offered instant gratification purchasing. Insert money, turn the knob, receive a sealed box. The presentation combined nostalgia for vintage vending machines with modern designer toy aesthetics. Pop Mart's success demonstrated that blind box collecting had global appeal. The psychology of blind box collecting differed from traditional toy collecting. The randomness created gambling-like excitement. Each purchase held possibility of getting a desired design or disappointment of receiving a duplicate. This unpredictability drove repeated purchases as collectors chased specific pieces. The series approach, limited sets of related designs, provided clear collecting goals while making completion challenging enough to feel like achievement. Designer art toys represented the high end of vinyl collecting. Cause, a fine artist, created collectible figures that sold through art galleries and online releases, often for hundreds or thousands of dollars. These weren't toys in the traditional sense, but art objects that happened to use toy formats and manufacturing methods. The line between toy collecting and art collecting blurred significantly. Bearbrick, manufactured by Japanese company Medicom Toy, offered collectible bear figures at various scales from 50% to 1,000%. 2.8 inches to 28 inches. Artists, fashion brands, and entertainment properties created Bearbrick collaborations, turning them into canvases for creative expression. Large-scale Bearbricks became status symbols, displayed prominently in homes and galleries. The community aspect of modern vinyl collecting heavily emphasized social media sharing and online interaction. Collectors photographed their displays, shared recent acquisitions, discussed new releases through Instagram, TikTok, and specialized forums. This digital-first collecting culture differed from previous eras, when collecting was primarily solitary, except for occasional in-person conventions or club meetings. The criticism of modern collectible culture focused on manufactured scarcity, blind box gambling mechanics, and social media-driven FOMO. Fear of missing out. Critics argued companies intentionally created artificial scarcity to drive speculation. The blind box model encouraged overspending as collectors purchased multiple boxes seeking specific pieces. Social media amplified feelings of inadequacy when seeing others' elaborate collections. Yet defenders emphasized accessibility, community, and joy. Funko Pops made collecting affordable and fun. Designer toys supported independent artists. Blind boxes added excitement to purchasing. Social media connected collectors worldwide, creating communities that transcended geography. The hobby brought people together and provided creative outlets for display and customization. The customization community around vinyl figures created an entire subculture. Artists purchased blank or existing figures and repainted them, creating unique one-of-one pieces. Custom Funko Pops depicted characters Funko hadn't officially released. Custom designer toys showcased artistic vision. These customs sometimes sold for more than official releases, blurring lines between professional and fan creations. Storage and display considerations reflected focus on visual presentation. Collectors installed wall-mounted shelves specifically for Funko Pops, often with LED lighting to create gallery-like displays. Detolf cabinets from IKEA became standard for protecting while showcasing collections. The emphasis on display over play reflected these collectibles' primary purpose. They existed to be seen, to create visual impact, to communicate identity and interests through curated arrangements. The investment aspect remained controversial. Some pieces, particularly rare exclusives or limited editions, appreciated significantly in secondary markets. Stories circulated of people funding vacations or making substantial profits through strategic collecting and reselling. But like Beanie Babies, speculation could drive prices to unsustainable levels, and not every collectible would retain value. Tonight, we've journeyed through over a century of collectible toys. From Teddy Roosevelt's compassionate moment that birthed the teddy bear through the digital age of vinyl figures and blind box surprises. What connects all these collectibles is their ability to preserve childhood wonder in physical form. These weren't just toys to be played with and discarded. They were companions, storytelling tools, and windows into imagination. They taught us about patience through the search for rare pieces, about community through shared collecting passions, and about the enduring value of things that bring us joy. The collector who carefully preserves a vintage Optimus Prime, the parent who passes down Lego sets to their children, the adult who finally acquires the Barbie they coveted in childhood. All are participating in the same fundamental human impulse to cherish, preserve, and find meaning in objects that represent our most precious memories. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the world of collectible toys. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may you always find joy in simple things, and remember that growing up doesn't mean leaving childhood behind. It means gaining the means to preserve the things that made childhood magical.